Right? This is what Christians did with Jesus. When they attributed the miracles which were done by Allah at Jesus' hand, they made them the miracles of Jesus. They elevated Jesus to the status of Allah. And of course, when you try to point this out to them, they're saying, no, we're not elevating Jesus, a man, to the status of Allah. We're saying, no, Jesus was Allah. You know, they have developed a whole philosophy to explain how it is that Jesus, a man, was in fact God. And when we question them, then who was he, according to your text, who was he praying to when he was on the cross? They say, well, he was only saying those things to show the people how to pray. They're running away. They don't want to deal with the obvious statements there that is there, because they know if they say yes, he was praying to God, then hey, it means he's not God. Because either that or you're saying that he was praying to himself, which implies problems. You know, people who talk to themselves, you know, we know what we do with those people, right? So to imply that, they don't want to get into that implication. They say, no, he was just doing that to show the people how to pray. But the implications are quite obvious. The fifth principle is that whenever we use the names of Allah in the context of human beings, we do not use them in their definite form, that is, saying the most merciful. We can say and refer to a person as being merciful, Rahim, but we don't call them Ar-Rahim, which means the most merciful. If we're going to use that definite form, Ar-Rahim, we must put before it Abd, meaning the slave worshipper of Ar-Rahim, or Ama, female slave worshipper, Amatul Rahim, Amatul Rahman, Amatullah, these kinds. We must use these terms. And at the same time that we must do that, we're not allowed to put the name Abd before Allah's creation. Abdul Nabi, which is a popular title in places like Egypt, and amongst the Shiites, they like Abdul Rasul. And this has entered amongst Sunni Muslims also. One of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, his name was Abdul Rasul. Ghulam Rasul. This is also a forbidden name. Ghulam Rasul means Abdul Rasul. Because Ghulam means Abd. So it's not a permissible name. Ghulam Rasul, and it's a very popular name. Ghulam Muhammad. It's like Abd Muhammad. Not allowed. We have to be very careful in the choosing of names. Now, that covers basically the names and attributes of Allah and how we maintain Allah's unity in their regard. The last category is that of Tawheed al-Ibadah, that is maintaining the unity of Allah with regards to worshipping Him. And that is the consequence of Tawheed al-Ibadah, Tawheed al-Rububiyyah and Tawheed al-Asma wa Sifat. Because if Allah is the one in control of everything, His attributes are unique, He is the only one who can answer our prayers, etc., then why should we call on or worship anyone besides Him? That doesn't make sense. Common sense tells us that if He has these attributes, then He is the one that we should pray to. And that's what Tawheed al-Rububiyyah is about. That we only worship Allah. We do not pray to anyone besides Allah. And praying to anyone in Islam, it involves calling on anyone who cannot answer your call. Because somebody might say, when I call on the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as Nuh Amim Keller proposes in his book, his translation of the Reliance of the Traveler. Please be aware of this book, Reliance of the Traveler, which is a popular book which has been distributed all over the English-speaking Muslim world. The first part of the book involves basically a translation of a Shafi'i fiqh handbook. No problem, in general. However, in the appendix, he has another story going. In the appendix, he promotes the idea of calling on the Messenger of Allah in prayer. That you can call on him in prayer. And they're saying, well, this is not the worship of the Prophet ﷺ. This is just calling on him in prayer. No. No. If you call on anyone who cannot answer your call, you are worshipping him. What I mean is, we call on each other to get help. You know, I need to start my car. Come and give me a hand, please. No problem. This is not considered to be worship. You're calling on somebody who can come to your aid. Although the higher level is not to call on anyone. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, if you can guarantee me you will not ask anyone for anything, I will guarantee you paradise. There's a hadith narrated by Abu Dhar al-Ghifari. If you can guarantee that you will not ask anyone for anything, the Prophet ﷺ said, I will guarantee you paradise. And Abu Dhar said, when the Prophet ﷺ said that, I never asked anyone for anything. And that's what he was known for. He would not ask anyone for anything. But this is not something required of everybody. This is the higher level. Back to the rest of us. We ask people to help us in this and that and the other. These people who can help us, no problem. But now, if we call on somebody who isn't here, right? They're living, right? You have groups that promote this. You can call on the sheikh, right? You have a problem, you need his help, just call on him. He's a living sheikh. The fact that you call on him, he's not present, he's not available to help you, that's worship. If he's dead, it's also worship. So whether you call on Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, who is popular in the Indian subcontinent and elsewhere, we're given the title Ghawsi Azam, right? Al-Ghawth Al-A'zam, meaning the greatest source of help, right? Whether you do that, and he's dead, or you call on Sheikh Nazim, you know, because you are from the Naqshbandi order and Sheikh Nazim is the man. So you call on him when you are in need. He's a living person, but he's not here. This is worship. And when you call on Rasulullah ﷺ, again, you have a line of argument that people try to raise, but he's living. He's living. Prophet ﷺ said that when the prophets die, the earth doesn't eat their body. Okay. Because the earth doesn't eat their body, does it mean they're living? Or this is just a miracle from Allah? Point number one. Point number two, if Rasulullah ﷺ was not dead, then the Sahaba committed a grave crime by burying a man alive. Isn't it? If he wasn't dead, then what are they doing burying him? This is nonsense. This is error. Clear error. The point is that Rasulullah ﷺ is dead. And this, we know this happened when he first died Omar came in and he was upset. People were saying that he was dead. And he threatened people. He stood up there with his sword and said, anybody who says that the Prophet ﷺ is dead, you're going to lose your head. People backed off. Abu Bakr came, he went in, checked the Prophet ﷺ, lifted up the garment, saw he was dead, kissed his forehead, put it back, and came outside, pushed Omar aside. He said, whoever was worshipping Muhammad ﷺ, know that Muhammad is dead. But whoever was worshipping the Lord of Muhammad, then know that the Lord of Muhammad is ever living. Right? So, the point is that to call on anyone who cannot answer your prayers is worship. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Ad-du'a huwa al-ibadah. Calling, ad-du'a. To make dua, to call on, from da'wah means to call. It is worship in its essence. That is the essence of worship, calling. We say, Ya Allah. If you say, Ya Rasulullah, you're involved in worshipping the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. That's why in the masjids where you see people like to put up these plates, ornate plates, it says, Ya Allah, Ya Rasulullah. This is wrong. It's wrong. Now some people say, well, don't we say in our tashahhud, As-salamu alayka ayyuhar Rasul? Don't we say this? Peace be on you, O Messenger. Don't we say this? This is not in our tashahhud. Yes, it is in the one that the Prophet ﷺ taught us. But Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, in Sahih al-Bukhari, he informed that when the Prophet ﷺ was living among them, they used to say that. But when he died, instead they said, As-salam ala nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be on the messenger and Allah's mercy and blessings. They didn't say alayka anymore, ayyuhar rasul or ayyuhar nabi. They said as-salam ala nabi. Now scholars have differed as to whether you should follow what Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said or whether we should just go with what the Prophet ﷺ initially taught. The proper methodology is to go with what Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said. Why? Because he said, we used to, not just I used to, that may be a personal thing on his part, but he said we, the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and there are a number of other narrations of other companions saying the same thing. So, if we now are going to understand what Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught us, do we understand it as our own minds tells us, or do we understand it the way that the companions of the Prophet ﷺ understood it? This is the crux of the matter. Our understanding of Islam should depend on how the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ understood Islam. Otherwise, you will end up with all kinds of interpretations. The Qadianis, they say, we follow Quran and Sunnah. In fact, in Pakistan, where everybody else pray with their hands, for example, below their navel, they don't raise their hands in general when going from, going into ruku', coming out of ruku', all these other takbirs, they don't, raising of the hands, they don't do it. The people who do it are the Qadianis. Right? Because it's in Sahih Bukhari. It's in Sahih Muslim. So in terms of following the Sunnah in that respect, they are doing it more closely than the majority of Indian and Pakistanis. However, in a more crucial area, where Allah says in the Quran, describing Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as not being the father of any of your men, but Khatam al-Nabiyyin, but the seal of the prophethood. What do they do with this? When they believe in Mirza Ghulam Ahmad as a prophet having coming after Rasulullah ﷺ. What do they do with this verse? They say, well, if you go to the Arabic dictionary and you look up the word khatam, you find that the word khatam not only means seal, it also means ring. It also means a ring. So they say, as the ring, when you put it on your finger, it beautifies your hand. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was the beautification of the prophethood and not the seal. You see? They have gone in and made their interpretation to suit their set of beliefs concerning Ghulam Ahmad. So what is our response? Yes, the Arabic dictionary will tell you this. However, the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they didn't understand it that way. When Allah said Khatam al-Nabiyyin, they understood it meant the seal of the prophethood. Finish. And they narrated other statements of the Prophet ﷺ saying, La nabiyya ba'di, there is no messenger coming or prophet coming after me. That's the understanding. And that is the correct understanding. So this is why we find those who stress the importance of understanding the Quran and the Sunnah according to the interpretation or the understanding of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een, those who came after them, and the Tabi'een and those who came after them, about whom Rasulullah ﷺ said, Khairun Nasi Qarni, the best of people are my generation. ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, then those who followed them. ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, then those who followed them. Those first three generations, the best of generations, they are referred to by the Arabic term as Salaf as-Salih, the righteous predecessors. So when a person says, I am a Salafi, I follow the way of the Salaf, they are saying, I understand the Quran and the Sunnah as it was understood by the Sahaba and those early generations. That is what Salafiyyah means. It doesn't mean a group. Because you may have a group which says, we are the Salafis, but they may be doing things which are not in accordance with the way of the Sahaba and the early generation. They may be saying things which is not in accordance. So though they may claim for themselves, we are the Salafis, they are not. Or they're in error. We don't attribute whatever they say and whatever they do to the Salaf. Unless what they have done is based really in the practice of the early generation. Then we can say, yes, that is the way of the Salaf. The way of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, that way about which Prophet ﷺ said, my nation will divide up into 73 different sects. 72 in hell and 1 in paradise. And when the companions asked the Prophet ﷺ, what is that one? He said, the one that I am on and you are on. Ma ana alayhi wa ashabi, the one which I am following and my companions follow. So this is the correct understanding. So when we come back to Tawheed al-Ibadah, worshipping Allah by maintaining His unity in that worship, we do so in the way that the companions of the Prophet ﷺ did. We do not invent or introduce new ways of worship. As some people, for example, they want to celebrate the birthday of the Prophet ﷺ. So they say, well, this is something good. They may even bring a verse from the Quran. They would say, Allah said in the Quran, Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. They bring this verse out. And you say, well, where does it say celebrate the Prophet's birthday there? It's there, it's there. This is what it means. It's their interpretation. Right? Their interpretation. The point is that the companions of the Prophet Muhammad didn't understand that verse that way. And that's why they never celebrated his birthday. And he himself didn't understand that verse that way, and he didn't celebrate his birthday. And the early generations didn't celebrate his birthday. It wasn't until some 400 years after the time of Prophet Muhammad that his birthday began to be celebrated in Egypt in the Fatimid Shiite rule. In the Fatimid Shiite dynasty in Egypt, the celebration of the Prophet's birthday began. So we say this is not legitimate. Some people say, well, okay, leave that aside. Just the idea of celebrating his birthday, what are we doing in the celebration? We're only remembering Rasulullah sallallahu. We're asking Allah to bless him. You know, these are all good things. We remember his seerah, his life, and all this. These are all good things. You say this is not good in Islam? Yes, these things are good things. But to combine them on that day, every year, you have now created something new in the religion. This is bid'ah. Similarly, we could ask, if somebody suggested to you, you have to understand bid'ah, sometimes it involves something completely new, like the idea of the birthday celebration, because we don't really have any precedents for it at all in Islam. But bid'ah may actually have precedence in the religion itself, wherein a person takes something like, after prayers, raising your hand in dua. After every prayer, people raise their hands in dua. People say, well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with it? Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that Allah does not like, or he is shy, that anyone would raise their hands in dua and that they would put their hands down without fulfilling their wish, their desire. Isn't that imply that we should raise our hands in dua? Prophet Muhammad ﷺ raised his hands in the dua of istisqa, the prayer to seek rain. He raised his hands so high, that's how he did it, they could see his armpits. Say, here's the evidence. But the point is, we do not find any narration indicating that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, after every prayer, raised his hands in dua. People say, this is picky. Why are you going to get so picky? You know, if it said that you raise your hands, Allah is shy not to give you. He said the Prophet ﷺ raised his hands in istisqa. Why can't we just do it after every prayer then? What's the problem here? We say, the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is not just what he did, but also what he didn't do. You have sunnah fi'liyah, the sunnah of actions which he did, and sunnah tarkiyah, or sunnah of actions which he didn't do, which are religion, dealing with the religion. Of course, there are many things he didn't do which he didn't like personally. We're not talking about those. We're talking about things connected with the religion. The things he didn't do, it is sunnah not to do. Very important. Because if one opens this door, that as long as he said this, he said that, we can put it all together and come up with something which he didn't do, then the religion becomes innovated. You can now change the religion at will. Because I can bring something to you. I say to you, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, prayer in jama'ah is worth 27 times prayer by yourself. Everybody knows this. He also said, whenever you enter the masjid, you should pray 2 rak'at, 2 units of prayer, before sitting down. Everybody knows this. Let us put the two together. We come into the masjid. I now suggest to you let us make Tahiyatul Masjid in Jama'ah. If I suggest that, what do people say? He said, no, you can't do that. Why not? Prophet ﷺ said the prayer in Jama'ah is worth more than the prayer by yourself. He also said, whenever you come in, you should do these 2 rak'ah. Why can't we put them together and do it? Well, the Prophet ﷺ didn't do it. That's why, yes. He didn't do it, so we cannot do it. He made tahajjud in Jama'ah. This is also sunnah, and he did it in Jama'ah. We can do it because he did it. But to do Tahiyat al-Masjid in Jama'ah, or to do the sunnahs before Dhuhr, the sunnahs after Dhuhr in Jama'ah, we can't do it because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ didn't do it. And that's emphasized by his well-known statement, مَا تَرَكْتُ شَيْئًا يُقَرِّبُكُمْ إِلَى اللَّهِ إِلَّا وَأَمَرْتُكُمْ بِهِ. I didn't leave anything which would bring you closer to Allah without instructing you to do it. That's the bottom line. If it's gonna bring you closer to Allah, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us to do it. If he didn't tell us to do it, it will not bring you closer to Allah, no matter how good you think this is, how much reasoning you give behind it, it will not bring you closer to Allah. It will take you farther away from Allah. This is the basic principle based on the statement of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, Man ahdatha fi amrina ma laysa minhu fahuwa rad. Whoever introduces anything new in this religion of ours, not approved by Allah and by the Messenger of Allah, it is rejected. This is to protect the religion in its pristine purity from change, deviation, etc., like what happened to the other religion, the other messages which were of Islam but became distorted in time, like that of Christianity, Judaism, etc., etc. So, when we come to ibadah, we recognize that it means worshipping Allah alone. It should be worshipping Allah with sincerity. Because to worship Allah alone but insincerely as a ritual, then of course we're not worshipping Allah as He deserves to be worshipped. There's no real reward in that worship. Furthermore, it means worshipping Allah as Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught us to worship Allah. Not as we might feel or think or imagine or deduce, but we worship Allah as Rasulullah ﷺ taught us to worship Allah. And connected to all of this, of course, is the concept that worship of Allah is not limited to the rituals of worship, but it also involves the emotional aspects wherein we should not love others more than we love Allah. To do so is to worship or to give an aspect of worship to Allah's creation. As Allah stated in the Quran, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَتَّخِذُ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. And there is among human beings those who take for worship others besides Allah as equals to Him. But Allah goes on to say, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. And those who believe, they love Allah more. Their love of Allah is greater. This is the sign of belief, true belief. So where our relatives, our children, our friends, people on our job, these people become more beloved to us than Allah, meaning that when they ask us to do things, we will do them knowing that they involve disobeying Allah, then we have loved them more than we love Allah. Also, it involves putting our trust in Allah ultimately above all other things. It involves fearing Allah above all other things. If we fear the people in our jobs, we might lose the job if we do this thing which Islam requires of us, then we, in that fear others more than we fear Allah. And these are internal aspects of worship. We have the external aspects and we have the internal aspects. And also, when we attribute the right to make halal and haram to human beings, meaning that where Allah has said this thing is halal, then people come along and say, no, it is haram. And we accept that. In this regard, we also have worshipped other than Allah. There's an element of worship here. And of course, some people may say, how, where? Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he quoted a verse from the Quran on one occasion, describing the Christians and the Jews, saying, اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله. They have taken their rabbis and monks as lords besides Allah. This is Surah Tawbah, verse 31. When he said that, Adi ibn Hatim, one of his companions, who was a convert from Christianity, he said, O Messenger of Allah, we didn't used to worship them. We didn't take them as lords. Prophet ﷺ said, didn't they make halal what Allah made haram, and make haram what Allah made halal, and you followed them? He said, yeah, that's true. He said, that was your worship of them. So, worship may involve also allowing people to make haram and halal for us what goes against the clear instructions from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sometimes, of course, it doesn't mean each and every instance this may be classified that way, because it may be in ignorance. For example, you have commonly some people following a particular school of thought, they jump up and say, eating shrimps is haram, and crabs, and lobsters. We can't eat these things. We say, what is your evidence? Did Rasulullah ﷺ forbid them? Did the Quran forbid them? No, but. No, there's no but. If we don't have the evidence, then we don't have the right to prohibit them. Because all foods are halal for us except those which have been specifically prohibited. This is the principle which governs food, drink, clothing, our dealings, worldly dealings, needs, etc. All are halal except those things which are specifically prohibited. Whereas ibadat, things which have to do with worship, which are specifically designed for worship, all forms of worship are prohibited except those which have been specifically made permissible by Rasulullah ﷺ. That's the opposite, to protect it from innovation. So when we come to those kind of issues where people are coming around and saying this is haram, this is halal, so and so, if it goes against what we know from the Quran, from the Sunnah of Rasulullah ﷺ, we must ask them for evidence. No matter how great a Maulana or Sheikh or so and so may be, if they're saying this is haram, we must ask them for the evidence. What is the proof? If they can't bring us proof, they're just telling us, well, in my opinion, and in so and so's opinion, and this one's opinion, and that one's opinion, we say, thank you, but no thank you. That basically covers our introduction to Aqidah, Usul al-Aqidah. Now, we'll take some questions for about 10 minutes. It's short. We're leaving additional questions to the last session in the evening, where we have gone over our allotted time. Normally the sessions we try to keep it within an hour, though some of them are longer than others. Okay, we'll take the first question. If the Quran speaks against sects forming different groups, etc., in the community, why do Muslims do this? Well, the Quran prohibits drinking alcohol. Why do Muslims drink alcohol? Quran prohibits so many things, but Muslims are doing them. It's just a part of the whole system that though Islam may prescribe one thing, human beings have a choice of either following what Allah has prescribed or not. So where they choose not to, then they disobey. This is error. Sometimes it's a matter of ignorance. They don't know it. That's what they've grown up with. This is what everybody was doing in their area. That's what they were practicing. That's how they understood Islam. See, sometimes it's innocent. Sometimes it has to do with their own choice. And of course Allah will judge them according to whether it was a deliberate choice where they understood and knew better but they went and did it, or whether it was something out of ignorance they didn't have any opportunity to understand otherwise and they made that mistake as a result of it. Go ahead.
I know some people who go to gatherings where they keep moving around and they start to chant and they give salam to the Prophet. Is that count as shirk as well?
Our brother's question concerning gatherings where people prepare certain foods and they gather around it and they make certain chants, they make certain du'as or whatever, and then they distribute this food in different ways and they call it niyaz or something like this, right? Is that shirk? Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's shirk, depending on what people believe in it, because you have some people who believe that when they do that, the Prophet ﷺ becomes present in their gatherings. Yeah. If this is what you believe, then there's some aspect of shirk happening here. But if it is just that you feel that Allah's blessings will be on this, and when you give this food you get reward from it, so in other words you feel this is a righteous deed, then we say this is bid'ah, innovation in the religion, because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not do it. Question from sisters? I'm going to take one.
My question is as far as the Shia, would they be considered following shirk or they practice bid'ah? That's what I would confused.
Well, our sister's question in terms of the Shia, do we consider them as being involved in shirk or are they practicing bid'ah? I would say both. They're practicing bid'ah and they're following practices of shirk. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they become non-Muslims, because we have in the body of quote-unquote Sunni Muslims those who are doing the same. Those who are going to the graves of the saints. Ajmer in India, for example, a great gathering place of thousands, 100,000 Muslims go there and pray to the dead person in the grave there. Okay? And they call themselves Sunni Muslims. Well, they're involved here in aspects of shirk as well as bid'ah. So these acts, of course, though forbidden in Islam, etc., it doesn't necessarily mean that it makes a person a non-Muslim. Only if that person has understood what is wrong in what they're practicing, what is correct has been made clear to them, and they reject that, at that point they become, in fact, disbelievers. And that is left to Allah. Because we don't need to make this judgment. Because again, some people might say, well, I went to this person who was going to the grave and I told him and I brought the evidence to him and he still went. Well, it may be that the way you brought the evidence, he wasn't able to understand. Maybe the language you used. Maybe your explanation was weak. A variety of different things. Allah knows whether that person actually grasped it and decided otherwise. So that ruling of disbelief, that is left to Allah. It's not on us now to go and tell Muslims, you are a kafir, you Muslim, you are a kafir. No. We can say, yes, you're involved in some aspects of shirk here. Beware, so and so, we advise them, so and so. These are actions of kufr, so and so. But to say, you are a kafir, we don't have that right. Allah, that judgment is left to Allah. Unless the person openly tells you, I am a kafir. I don't believe. I reject that which is clear and obvious from the religion.
Just a clarification, when we say that raising hands may go after the prayer, that's raising hands in Jama'ah. Imam raises his hand and everybody follows that. But individual raising hand is taken.
Okay, brother's question. The raising of the hands in dua after every prayer. Is it just the raising of the hands in jama'ah, along with the Imam, which everybody knows clearly Prophet ﷺ didn't do that? Or is it just the raising of hands by yourself? If you just, as an individual, not in Jama'ah, but after every prayer you raise your hand, that is also bid'ah. Because we have no evidence that the Prophet ﷺ raised his hands after every prayer. In fact, we have other evidence that he didn't. So for you to make it a regular practice, after every prayer you must raise your hands in dua, you have made a bid'ah, an innovation. Now if you do it on occasion, the mood catches you, you feel like it, you raise your hands on occasion, no problem. But when you fix it as a ritual, after every prayer you're doing it, now you have innovated. From the sisters? Yeah, after this, next session. Sister's question concerning the sunnah of doing and the sunnah of not doing, where I stress that this is in matters of religion. The sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ was to not eat dab, which is a desert lizard. It was served, people ate it in Arabia. It was offered to him, he didn't eat it. That was his sunnah, not to eat it. But we are not obliged to follow that sunnah, because that was his personal dislike and he said it. Right? So where the Prophet ﷺ had a personal dislike, we're not obliged to follow that. Or where he had a personal like, for example, when he went to the marketplace, he wanted to get a pair of sandals. He chose a particular style of sandals. One which had 2 straps, made from cow's leather, reddish colored, from Yemen, with the hair scraped off. You can find this description of his sandals in Shama'il at-Tirmidhi. Now, is that deen? Is that something that we as Muslims should try to follow? No. It's not required of us. That was his personal like, and that's what he chose. We're not obliged to follow that. That is not considered a part of the deen. Of course, some people in ignorance, there's a book called Shama'il at-Tirmidhi, translated originally into Urdu, from there into English, which was around. I had a copy of it, where the author, after looking at this hadith, the hadith compiled by Imam at-Tirmidhi, scholar of hadith, describing the sandal of the Prophet ﷺ, he in his commentary went on to explain the benefits from the sandal. If you drew a picture of the sandal, you put it under your pillow, this is going to happen for you, and that is going to happen, and hey, we say, where did this come from? Where did this come from? Right? This is where a person has gone off. Right? So, if we take those things, which are personal preferences of the Prophet ﷺ in day-to-day life, which has nothing to do with religion, and we make it a part of the religion, either we are making bid'ah, in that we're offering these other rewards in this way, as people did, or we're making the religion restricted to certain parts of the world. Because if that was from the Sunnah, and this is preferable for us to do, then what are we saying about the practice of this for the Eskimos? Now if they were to choose a pair of sandals with 2 straps and go out, in the North Pole there, they would get frostbite and have to have their legs amputated. Now we're saying basically they can't get the reward of the Sunnah. No. The Sunnah, where it has to do with religion, this is something applicable universally. Those things which are personal, you will find them limited to particular areas, particular periods of time.
You didn't use this term, but what is the appropriate meaning of Rafida, and who are they among Shia?
Well, the term Rafida was applied by scholars to those who rejected. Rafida from Raft means to reject. Those were the rejectors, right? Rafida means reject. And there was a disagreement which developed amongst some of the descendants of Ali from Hussein, in which one of the sons went one way and one of the other sons went another way. Those who rejected the way of one of the sons became known as the Rafida. This is what they use it as one of the terms, because those who rejected and went along with the other line, these end up in practical terms to be those who are known as the Twelver Shiites, the mainstream Shiites. Rafida really applies to the Twelvers, although some people take it to mean the extremists amongst them. But in general, really, it refers to mainstream Shiaism as we know it. Ithna Ashriya is the Twelvers, meaning they follow the 12 Imams.
Brother, please correct me if I'm wrong, that this At-Tahiyya Lillah that we read in Salah, isn't it the conversation that took place between Allah and the Prophet when he was visiting him right after the Salah?
Well, that's news to me, sister. I don't know if you have a hadith on that, to that effect, which is authentic, then we can say that's the case. I have never come across such hadith. Not that I've come across every hadith that there exists, but I don't know it. If you can bring it, then we can look at it. Okay, our sister clarifying that this explanation is from books written in Urdu where there is no evidence for it. Inshallah. Did you ask a question before? Okay, go ahead.
I wanted to ask a question about the Ameenah. So, say you were looking, like you said, you were these little Quran things, say you were looking at the little things or the Prophet is that considered like a sin?
Okay, brother's asking if a person wears a pendant which says Allah or Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or it has Ayatul Kursi, we could say even. I have some pendants like that. Ayatul Kursi is etched on it, right? Is this considered shirk? Well, it depends. If you believe that in wearing this it will protect you, then yes, you have entered into shirk. But if you are wearing it because you feel it is jewelry, it looks attractive and you like it and you're wearing it as an accessory, right? Of course, as a man wearing it around your neck, this is questionable anyway, because then you're starting to look like women, right? That's another issue, right? Men wearing chains and stuff like this. This is considered imitation of the dress of females. But for a woman wearing these things, if she's not believing that this is going to protect her in any way, then it's not considered to be an aspect of shirk. Alaikum salam wa barakatuh.
I would like to know, you said that you don't put your hands in the dua. But when should you do the dua? If you want to do the dua, you need to dua before you raise the prayer.
Okay, I didn't say don't raise your hands when making dua. Please get this clear, right? I didn't say that. I'm saying don't make it a regular practice. What I'm saying is sometimes you may raise your hands while making dua, and other times you make your dua without raising your hands. This is the point. Let us not feel that the only way to make dua is you must raise your hands. This is not the case. You can make dua without raising your hands. Right? So this is what I'm saying. The making of dua also during the time of sujood. This is the time Prophet ﷺ recommended this, or times when du'as are accepted. One may do so in the salah at that point also.
You know, I come from a community where the culture, the dominant culture, they revere their dead, you know. And so at the end of the salah, they ask the imam to say something, and then he says something like, you know, in Arabic, and everybody prepares that. I mean, and then he says something else, I mean, is this okay?
The idea after prayer, to ask people to pray for the dead. Somebody has died, they're asking to pray for the dead. The idea of prayer for the dead is by itself is okay. One may do so. Asking Allah's forgiveness for this person who has died, etc. But where it becomes a ritual, yarhamukallah, where it becomes a ritual, after prayers regularly, people are asking, and this is just a standard practice, then we have now innovation here. We have a kind of innovation.
So it's okay to do it Saturday?
On occasion, if somebody asks, the imam, it's just like asking somebody to pray for you, and they make a dua, and when they finish making the dua, you say, Ameen, for example. May Allah, Ameen meaning, may Allah accept it. Pardon? Okay. The evil of what Allah has created. Now, when Allah created the fish spine, in the fish it's got a backbone with these like spines on it, right? That backbone with the spines in the fish was a good thing. It kept the fish's body together so he could swim in the water, etc. Now, if that spine, any of the pieces of that spine, we call it a fish bone, if that sticks in your throat, that's an evil thing. Relative to yourself, that becomes an evil thing. So there's evil coming out of what Allah has created in that context. You understand? So we're not saying Allah created this to harm you, but harm may come out of it. Or rain. Rain is a good thing, but sometimes rain becomes a terrible thing, right? So there's this harm which comes out of rain, but is rain in and of itself evil? No. Yeah, okay, this is another example of, in our lives, the issue of evil with good intent is that of the dentist injecting in your gums Novocaine or whatever. It is something painful. The needle is so long you can feel it tickling your toes, right? Nobody likes the dentist needle. But we subject ourselves to it on a regular basis to prevent greater harm, which is the rotting of our teeth and the root canals and everything else. So that evil, what appears to us external of that circumstance to be something evil, is in fact something good for us. It may be a relative thing, for example, where I remember one occasion seeing a picture in the newspaper, I cut it out, where they had this Egyptian brother, and it had on one side his sister was kissing him on one cheek, and his father was kissing him on the other cheek. And he had this huge smile from ear to ear, his thumbs were up like this. And I read the caption, what was it? What had happened was, he was supposed to catch a particular flight, the Gulf Air flight, last year, which was going to Bahrain. Now this air flight crashed in the sea. When he had gone to the airport to catch his flight, he was refused the right to go on that flight because he was missing a stamp on his passport. And in Egypt, you have to have 1,000 stamps before you can do anything, right? Yeah, so many people have to stamp. So he had gotten all his stamps except for one stamp. And there he was at the airport, one stamp missing, they wouldn't allow him. Of course, his whole world was falling apart around him because he was a teacher. It was a flight of teachers. They were going back, the beginning of the new term, he had to go back and teach. So to come back late, maybe they will fire him, they're going to take off pay or whatever. He was terrible. His world crashed around him. He was begging, screaming, please. No, flight took off. Then he heard the flight crashed. And everybody on board died. So there he was in the newspaper the next day, big smile on his face, That which he thought was such a terrible calamity the day before was now fortune, good fortune for him. So in that relative sense, though it was evil, in the sense of what happened to the other people, for that individual, it was